Welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time to come and picking our session from all the wonderful sessions that you could choose from. And we're pretty sure that you've learned a lot and enjoyed from Roman's session, and we're going to continue some of the concepts and dive really deeper now into some not so conventional authorization techniques that you might not have heard about. So I'm Rayner, and this is Christian, and we are both part of the platform team at Business Central, and we handle a whole bunch of areas, but we're also kind of the authorization experts. So let's dig into this. Yeah. So before we start, let's take a recap, right? Like, let's figure out how does a user normally sign into Business Central. And what this usually encompasses is you have, some Business Central user. They get authenticated in Entra ID, which means you verify who you are. Like, this is my username, this is my password, my 2FA. That's great. And then we have two layers of authorization that's standard in our Business Central auth flow, right? And the first one is you're authorized to features in Business Central, and that can mostly be done with a subscription or a license. So you have the Business Central premium subscription. We know this. The second layer of authorization is through permission sets, where you restrict it to the specific operation within Business Central, right? From all the things that you are entitled to. And then you get access to the client. So just to summarize what I just said, imagine you have a HR employee, and you authorize them with the premium subscription to both view and edit HR data. But then if you want them to only view the HR data and not change salaries, for example, then you'd want to restrict them to only the HR viewer permission sets. So we know this, right? And this is the normal flow, and everyone knows this, but this is not exactly what we're going to talk about. You also could be authorized in a different way, where you have like the administrator role, and Roman explained some of those in the previous session. And this is also pretty common for a lot of partner scenarios, right? And if you notice, the pictures are exactly similar, and it changes in this one part. There's a few other ways. So now let's talk about some of the non-conventional ways that you can actually be authorized in Business Central. And the first concept we are going to dig into is called security groups. And let's understand what these are. So security groups is not a Business Central concept per se. It's something that has been sitting in Azure and Entra ID for a while. It allows you to manage a group of users. And a lot of your customers are most likely already using this to manage access to SharePoint, to Outlook, Azure, other Azure apps. So they already know about this, right? And obviously, Business Central would also like to leverage this. And if you attended Waldo's OG session, then some of you guys also know that this is pretty similar in concept to user groups or the security groups for Windows groups that we have on-prem. And obviously, you can leverage these in SaaS, and we're going to show you 3 scenarios, which will make this pretty effective for you to design and support your really big customers. So the first one is managing access to environments. And what Business Central allows you to do is you can now specify a security group on the Business Central admin center page that you are familiar with, and if you hadn't, then Roman also showed it earlier. And only the direct and indirect members of this group can then access the environment once you link it. Of course, these restrictions don't apply to admins. They can freely sign in regardless of when you set this security group and you link it. But we'll talk a little more about this later. So how exactly does this work? And this is the admin center. And we've opened this to the environments page. If you haven't defined a security group for environment access yet, this is how you do it. You can click here, and then you can select from your available Entra ID groups. So you need to go back to Azure and either create one if you haven't already, or you could use one that already exists. Once you've selected it, you can also then come here and modify it if you need to do that for some reason. And let's say like another colleague has somehow deleted or renamed or something like that the security group. Then if you come and users complain that you can't sign in, you can always come here and check, and it will give you a little warning saying, hey, you've linked a group, but we can't really find it anymore, and you can set the correct one or something like that. So that was environment access. The second way you can use security groups is to assign permission sets. And the way this works is you can link the security group that you have in Azure in Business Central and then assign your permission sets to that security group. And all the members of this group in Azure who are licensed to Business Central will also get these permission sets automatically. So just for example, I have the users page over here, and you can see there's a user. I've not yet assigned any permission sets to the security group, so this is empty. But then if I go to the security groups page, I can say new. It'll then allow me to select my security groups from Entra ID. I select the one that I've set up, for example, like let's say HR viewers or something, and then I can go in and assign a permission set to that security group. So I can filter and pick exactly the ones I want. And now when I go to the users page, right, and I can see that, hey, there's this, I already have the security group set up in Azure, so there's a user in there, and it will also indicate to you that, you know, this person is getting a permission set. This is the security group that they actually got this permission set from. So it becomes very easy for you to validate that, you know, what you set up actually works, like out of the box. And then finally, and then this is not a Business Central feature per se, again, but you are able to assign licenses in bulk in Entra ID. And this is great, especially if you've got large customers and you need to assign, you know, 50 or 100 or hundreds of licenses, and you don't want to, you know, assign them to each one. So you set up a security group, and you can assign the licenses to the entire group. Exactly. And then all the direct members of the group will get this license. And since we're in the realm of licensing, some aspects like location is very important. So make sure that you have a usage location for these users set. And I'll just show you how this works. This is a snapshot from Entra ID that I've created a security group called BC licensed users. And this is the one that I want to assign my license to. And then I can go ahead and add some members to these groups. So in this case, I have this one guy, Jason. I've added him to the group, and then I can assign the license to this group. Now, let's say you've set this up, and maybe the usage location or something was incorrect. So you want to verify that, you know, whatever you've set up actually works. How do you do that? You can go to the licensed users section, also in Entra ID, and verify all the members, right? Like who all have licenses. And Azure does this pretty cool thing that will show you that, hey, you have a license, and the access path is actually indirect, and it'll tell you which security group it gets the license from. So how does this look in Business Central? Well, it's completely abstracted away. So the user that we see now in the users page in Business Central, it shows you just in the way that you're familiar with that they have the Business Central for Information Worker license. So there's nothing special in Business Central. It's just a user who has been assigned a license. But the cool thing is that this license comes from a security group. And now you may be asking, OK, what do I do with all this information, right? So let's try and think of a hypothetical situation where you're now going to try and support a customer that's a really big clothing retailer, and they've got operations in Sweden and Denmark. And logically, let's say their company is structured like this, where they have some Danish ERP employees, and they have some Swedish ones, and they have like a sales function and an HR function in each of them. So there's many ways US partners could set this up, but let's talk about one of the ways that you could try. So again, we have the clothing company, they have the Danish employees, the sales HR, and also the Swedish. Now let's see how we would set this up. One way we could set this up in Entra ID. So first things that we talked about is you want to manage the access to the environment, and you also want to assign BC licenses. So let's start with our first security group. Let's call it ERP employees for DK, and you'll assign it 100 Business Central premium licenses, for example. You can do the same for the Swedish one, and now you've got the security groups for environment access and for licensing set up. The next thing that you want to do is you want to control the second layer of authorization, which is the permission sets. So let's set up those security groups. So I can create one for the Danish sales employees, and likewise for all of the others. And in this way, you can set up, for example, Entra ID and the security groups there. Now, how would this work in the Business Central environment? So let's take the Danish production environment, right? You can link the security group for access, because maybe the customer tells you, like, hey, I don't really want my Danish salespeople messing around with the Swedish sales items, right? So I want to keep those separate. So you link the DK ERP employees in Admin Center, so only they can access the production environment in Business Central. Now, the next thing that you want to do is you want to assign the sales permission sets to the sales employees and the HR permission sets to the HR employees, and you can do that as well, right? So your Danish environment is fully set up, and very simply, you can do this for the Swedish one as well. So far, so good. But you may say, hey, you know, this is like quite a bit of work, right? Like, I need to do this, but what is the true benefit of this? Now, when you're dealing with a customer this big, obviously there's going to be lots of changes. Let's say, for very simple, there's a new sales employee joining the Danish organization. Now, imagine if you didn't set this up like this, you would need to assign them license, you'd need to make sure somehow that they don't get access to the Swedish environments, you'd need to assign them the sales permission sets, but it's super easy if you set it up like this. All you had to do is add them to 2 security groups. One is the DK ERP one, where they directly inherit the license that they need for Business Central. They would also get only into the environment production for Denmark. So that's done straight away. And the moment you add them to the sales security group, they will inherit the permission set automatically. And that's the only setup you have to do. And you can imagine this also scales with other operations that you do. For example, somebody moves to a different function, et cetera, et cetera. So you only have to manipulate the security groups. And this way you can also leverage the customer admins to do this themselves, right? So it's pretty powerful. This was one of the concepts that we wanted to talk about, and I'm going to hand it over to Christian to tell you about the next one.
Yeah, thank you, Rayner. Service to service, or S2S as we call it, is a way to authenticate to web services, which is really designed for system integration. So you have one system that needs to call another. For example, if you have a web shop and needs to call Business Central APIs, then S2S is designed for that scenario. And the thing that sets S2S apart from normal authentication is that it works without user intervention. Like, how do users normally log in? They get some UI popped up, and you need to enter your email address and your password, and maybe you have 2-factor authentication enabled. That works fine. You also know that the next day you come in, maybe you don't even have to enter your password again because it remembered you. But then the third day, you come in, and now all of a sudden it wants you to re-authenticate. That's the nature of that kind of authentication. So if you use this technique in your web shop system, let's say, to authenticate to Business Central via the web shop, what it's going to do is going to work just fine until one day it needs also to re-authenticate, and then there's no user around, right? So this is why S2S is really the way to go for service to service. Since the system to system, service to service, application to application, there's no user involved here at all. This is actually not a new feature in Business Central that we support this. This was added in version 17 and then further expanded on in the following release. Let me show you how to set it up. Roman touched a little bit upon it. I'll just do a small repeat. So the way you set it up in Intra first is you go in there and you find app registration, click new, you get this page. You give it a name, and you leave the default values as they are, because that's typically what you need. And you click register. Now you have an application, an Intra application. And then you need to do 2 more things to make it work for our scenario. The first one is you need to assign a client secret. Roman also mentioned this. That can be a certificate, it can be a secret, and it can be some other things. In this scenario, I've used secrets, so I go and say new client secret, and I give it a name, and I give it an expiration. And when I press OK, I get that string that Roman also showed, which is kind of the password for my application, for my Intra application. That was step number 1. Step number 2, you need to grant it permission to call, to authenticate to Business Central APIs. So under API permissions, you say add permission, select Business Central. You cannot see that here, but you can see in the upper right corner that I'm in the context of Business Central APIs at this point. And there are 2 types of APIs. There's delegated and application. And delegated is for the user flow. So here you are granting permissions to the application such that when a user logs in, the user delegates to the application so the application can authenticate to Business Central on behalf of the user. That's not what we want here. We want application permissions because we are doing S2S. So I've selected application permissions here, and you can see there are a number of different permissions. You can say API.readWriteAll, that gives you access to all the APIs in Business Central. You can also say automation.readWriteAll, that gives you access to a subset of APIs, namely those that you use to set up an environment for first-time use, like install extensions, import configuration packages, and other setup tasks. And right above, you also see admin center.readwrite.all, which is the one that Roman used before. Finally, don't forget to grant admin consent. Right. So give it a name, add a client secret, put a check mark in this API permission. That's all it takes. Now we're done on the Entra side. On the Business Central side, we also need to register it because we need to give it permissions inside of Business Central. So here you go to the Microsoft Entra Applications list page, click New, you see this page. So you take the client ID from Entra, you give it a description and enable it, and then you can assign permission sets to it as any other user because ultimately it is a kind of a user in Business Central. And that's it. That's all it takes. A few minutes, I would say, to do this. Now it's ready to be used. I also have a small example. This is in C# with 4 lines of code, and you can see all the placeholders here. You have the client ID of the application, the secret, and then the tenant domain or tenant ID. Then that's all you need, and if you do this, you can request an access token. And at this point, there's the thing, right? It will not open any dialogues here, guaranteed, right? It's going to run in the background and can re-authenticate as many times as it wants. So here you get an access token. And if you've ever seen an access token, you know it's a very, very long string that kind of encodes who you are. So when you send this to Business Central APIs, it will know who you are and will let you in or not. So the way you send it, as usual way, you put it as a header of your HTTP requests. So if you actually go ahead and call Business Central APIs, let me explain entitlement. So Rayner explained in the very first slide how some of these entitlements usually work. Like for a user, how do they get entitlements? How do they get the right to use Business Central? The normal way is you buy a license and assign it to a user. That can be a premium license. When we see that you have a premium license, we give you a set of entitlements that give you right to use parts of Business Central. If we see you have an essential license, we give you the right to use, we give you some entitlements that give you a right to use a little bit less of Business Central. That's the normal way. Or maybe your user is an administrator of some kind. When we see you are an administrator, we give you a different set of entitlements, so you can do a different set of things inside of Business Central. For applications, the way you give entitlements to an application is by putting these crosses in those checkboxes in Entra. Automation read write all or API.readWriteAll. So you don't need to buy a license for your application, or you don't need to make it an administrator. All you need to do is put the checkboxes in Entra. That was S2S. Another concept, guest users, or invited users, as we also sometimes call them. So guest users are relevant when you have 2 organizations working together. For example, you have a customer and you have an accountant organization, and they need to work together because you want the accountant to look after your Business Central environment. So this is an example where you want your accountants maybe to have access to your Business Central. And the way you can make this work is in the following way. Inside the customer's Entra, you can see all the users that the customer has. You can also invite external users. So if I click this invite external users, invite external user, I will get a page like this where I can put in the email address of my accountant user, let's say. I can also ask Entra to send the invite for me by putting the checkbox there and have a little greeting. And when it sends the email, the accountant will receive that, and they will see you have been invited into the customer's tenant organization. And if they accept, they will be shown this dialogue where Entra is kind of telling the accountant, by accepting this, the customer organization will be able to see things about you, your profile, and they will also be able to see when you log in and what you do in the context of the customer organization. So if the accountant accepts this, they now become users in the customer organization. So now they appear here, but with a special type guest. And you can also see how they got there. They got there via an invitation. Also, if you look at the user principal name, it looks a little bit weird. User principal name is an ID of a user. It's not necessarily an email address, even though it typically is the same value, but it doesn't have to be the same value. This is an identification of the user. So the invited user, the guest user here, has a weird user principal name. It has the same domain, in this case, CDX something. And in front of the @ sign, you can see not just the normal alias, but the alias plus the organization that user natively lives in. So in this case, I can see that in my organization, I have the 3 users plus 1 guest user, and the guest user is actually Rayner, who lives natively in the Microsoft.com organization. So whenever you see something like this, you know immediately this is a guest user, and you can see who it really, really is. So when they log in, if Rayner were to log in here, he would not use this at all, this user principal name. He would log in using his Microsoft.com username, email address, and password, and all of that. But this is how it looks in the other organization. So if Rayner were to log in, before that, you can now assign licenses to this user, just like any other user. So here we can see, you maybe remember Rayner showed this where there were only 3 users. Now there's a 4th user, and we can also assign the Business Central for Information Workers license to that user. So with this, Rayner will be able to log in to the customer's Business Central. And if he does that, we can see it inside of Business Central. So he will become a user in Business Central. And you can see once again, here we call it authentication email. It's a little misnomer perhaps, but this is really the user principal name again, once again. So you can see this is a guest user right there. But everything else works the same way as for regular users. That was guest users. Then we have granular delegated admin privileges, or GDAP. What GDAP does is allow me as a customer to delegate some permissions, some admin privileges to you, so that you can manage my environments, which probably you have used already, perhaps some of you. Very, very convenient. There used to be another system called DAP, delegated admin privileges. That is dead. Don't use it. It's going away. GDAP is much better, and this is the only thing that will continue to exist. And the thing that makes GDAP better is it's much more granular. That's why it has that G in it. And how is it more granular? In a number of ways. It is you can limit the period. Like I, as a customer, can give you access for, let's say, 90 days only. With DAP, I would give you access, and if I didn't remember it to remove you, you will have access forever. So it's granular in the duration. It's also granular in the roles, so I can give you the roles that I think you need. Like, for example, this new role that Roman mentioned also, that gives you access to manage my Business Central environments. I could also give you access to this cloud app administrator that was asked about in the previous session, that would allow them to authenticate or to authorize the application in Antwerp. That was the second one. The third one is is actually kind of for you as a partner, also for the customer. When we set up a relationship, I'm the customer, you're the partner, I trust you as an organization. I don't know your employees. I don't, in the principle, don't care how you do your work. It's up to you. But on your side, you maybe have an interest in not over-granting permissions to all your employees. So with GDApp, you are able to say, for this customer, for me, only 2 of your employees should be able to manage that. You weren't able to do that before. So now you're able to sort of limit these employees manage these customers, those employees manage some other customers. Let me show you how it works. So even though it's me as a customer who need to approve this in the end, which makes sense, the process starts with you. You request an admin relationship with me as an organization. So you say, you give it a name, you go into Partner Center, and you say, find me as a customer, and say, I would like to create an admin relationship request. And you give it a name, give it a duration, you say what roles you need to have to do what you want to do. And you can also make it auto-extend. And then you say, save. What I will get is an email with these details. You can see it has the duration and other things, but the key thing here is the link. So you see the link here takes me to my M365 Admin Center. So if I go to that link, I will see all the details about this admin relationship request. I will see that you want these roles for this long and so on. If I say that makes sense, you need those, I will accept it. And then the admin relationship is active. So now it's there, it's like a contract between our 2 organizations. You can see it's active, you can see it will expire after a certain amount of time, it will not auto-extend. We're not done yet, because on your side, as I mentioned, you need to select who can use this, right? Which of your employees should be able to use this. And to do this, you open this admin relationship, and you select at the bottom what security groups, what groups of users, employees on your side, should have access to manage my environment. So once you've done that, added some users to that, then your employees can access my Business Central environment. And if they log in to my Business Central environment, I can see that too, just like I could for the S2S applications and for the guest user, because they become users in Business Central as well. But they look like this. So they are totally anonymized. I guess this is for privacy reasons. I'm not sure. I guess so. I don't need to know which of your employees actually log in. I can just see that they logged in. What I can also see is that they got the license for delegated admins. So GDApp gives you a lot more granularity than we had in the past, but there's one dimension of granularity that it doesn't give us, which is one thing that we have received requests from customers to support. And that is illustrated by this example. So let's say, continuing Rayner's example, we have 2 environments, one in Sweden, one in Denmark. And let's say for the Swedish environment, I have a Swedish partner that should manage it. And for the Danish environment, I have a Danish partner. How do I give them access to the right environments? I can't do that with GDApp, because for GDApp, I would give the Danish partner and the Swedish partner both the Business Central administrator role, which would enable them to log into Business Central and see all the environments. So what we really need here is a way to say, this environment is for this partner, and for this environment, this is managed by that partner. And this is actually one thing that we are working on. This will come. And now it is even more granular than it was with GDApp. And then I'll hand it over to Rayner again, who will talk about device users.
Thank you, Christian. Cool. Let's talk about device users. how many of you are aware of this concept of device users? Okay, that's pretty cool, like quite a few of you. So let's explain a little bit for those who don't know, what exactly is this? So device users allows basically simultaneous or concurrent access to Business Central. And the main scenario you could think about is you have some customer that has a warehouse with scanners or POS systems, point of sales systems, things like that, right? And just to illustrate the example, let's say you have a customer that has a warehouse with 100 scanners. But they know that at any given point, there's only going to be at most 33 scanners in use because the employees who use them are shift workers, right? So let's imagine over an entire day that only 1/3 of the employees are going to come in and use those scanners. So now it doesn't make sense to buy 100 licenses, right? You want to keep the cost low for your customers. You also want to make sure that they actually get the most out of the setup. So you don't want 100, so you buy 33 device licenses, and the whole point of this was to allow these to sign in simultaneously and give you concurrent access. So you don't need to assign a license each time to each user. Every time the shift changes, you just buy 33 of them, and whenever 33 sign in, they get access. So this has actually been around for quite a while. We released this back in version 15. But very recently, we also added support for running scheduled tasks as device users. And how exactly do you set this up? Again, this goes back to the setup in Enter ID, and it's also security groups. But this time, it's a very special security group because it's a very special name. So you have to create a group with a specific name, and all the users in this group will be considered device users. You do not have to assign the licenses to these users. Because as you went back to the example, the whole point was like only 33 out of 100 sign in at any given point. So we want to make that easy, right? And now let's look at how the concurrent access would work. So for example, OK, if you haven't seen the license, this is how it looks. And let's assume you bought 3 of those device licenses, right? And now your first shift worker comes in, they sign in, all good. You've got 2 spots left. The second one comes in, also fine. Third one comes in, no problem. Now the 4th person comes in, and they have to wait until the first shift worker is done, because we only allow 3 concurrent users to sign in with these licenses. And when the first shift worker's shift is over, they go away, and now the slot frees up, and this person can now sign in again. So the main takeaways of why we had added this or why we added this capability, it was you want to use a pool of device licenses. You don't want to continuously assign and remove licenses from users. And we see about 8% of our paid customers already leveraging this. And we just wanted to put a reminder out that this exists and this is there. So if you have scenarios which you could unblock with this, then please leverage it. And finally, remember, it's a very specific group, the name. So, and you do not have to assign the licenses to these users. So if you run into issues with concurrent access, and just a reminder again, Roman showed you the admin center, and in that you can also see active sessions. So if, for example, you get a call from one of our customers saying that, hey, I can't sign in, you can always go and close any session that's still open, even though the shift worker has gone away. So we showed you quite a few techniques on, that's not really super conventional on how you could authorize. But what if you have issues? Because a lot of these are pretty complicated, right? There's setups in Entra, there's setups in BC, and how do you troubleshoot this stuff? So hopefully, our error messages are helpful to pinpoint exactly what's wrong. And in most cases, we try our best. Sometimes, let us know, we'll improve things. But a lot of this setup can really be hard and outside of domains that we can spot, right? For example, like I mentioned, the usage location when you're assigning licenses, it's very hard to know when that doesn't work, for example. So then you have option 2. if the message is not clear enough over here, remember that you also have a session ID. And we've talked a lot about App Insights. We love it. It is super cool. And you can go and put in exactly that session ID and figure out what was wrong, what went wrong. I was missing some permission, or I was missing a group, or some other role was not there, et cetera, et cetera. You can figure that out exactly. If you can't, then again, the information on this error message is super, super useful to us at Microsoft when we want to debug issues that you have. It makes it very easy for us to spot and follow up what went wrong. So please send us that information when you reach out to us. And yes, let's do a little summary of what we've done today and what we've talked about. So we said in the beginning how users usually get authorized in Business Central, right? We talked about the 2 layers of authorization, where first you're entitled to different features in Business Central, and the second where you restrict access through permission sets. And now we've seen a lot of additional techniques that are purely based out of Entra, which make this very, very cloud native. And it's a stepping stone to really unblocking a lot of scale and managing bigger customers and larger customers with different locations, et cetera. We've seen how you configure and use some of these techniques. And we also talked about how you could troubleshoot them. So Christian and I did something interesting. We just looked at a day's worth of our telemetry to see what kind of login errors are people seeing. And we took an entire snapshot, and we were actually, we hope that we picked the right themes for this topic today, and hopefully you know a lot more about roles and security groups, and you can go and look at App Insights and figure out what went wrong and fix these issues for customers. And yes, and we hope you continue to leverage these techniques and manage your users at scale. That's all we have for now, but let us know if you have questions.
Oh, the other one. God.
My question is related with the service-to-service authentication.
Say again, service-to-service?
Yeah, and that in relation with the operational limits for API calls to the environment, because now the operational limits will be per user, and one of the Microsoft recommendations is because all API calls are from one user, because this is the service-to-service authentication, to create more than one and to rotate them. That means that I have to register more than one Microsoft Entra applications, and because they are not limited by the license, is there some limitation how many I can create?
No, good question. So the question is about S2S and the limits that we have on them. As you mentioned, we have now switched over to use per user limits as to how many web service calls you can make in a certain amount of time, and how many we will process simultaneously. So for human users, Entra application users, any other user, there's a limit per user. So if you have 2 applications, they will have twice the throughput capability. If you have 5, you can have 5 the throughput. If you have 100, because we don't have a limit, you can make as many as you like and have as much really throughput as you like.
But that means basically there is no limit.
There's no limit, no, you're right.
And if you want to learn more about that, we actually, both of us have a session tomorrow on scale in Business Central, where we're going to talk about that. So I think you'll find that interesting.
And now the guy behind you that you stole it from me.
Thank you. When the KDE isolation per partner is coming, is it a half year, 1 year?
Probably, Roman, what do you say, in a half year maybe? End of the year.
End of the year.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, let's take them.
Hi, I'm just wondering regarding the device users from, let's say, from the scanners. The customers sometimes would like to know who's using the scanner at that moment. Let's say they are booking shipment or a put away or pick list or whatever. They need to know who's that person at that moment.
Yep.
Is there a way to trace?
Yeah.
Instead of using the device login?
So if they are licensed via the device user mechanism that Rayner explained, at the end of the day they will be logging in as themselves. We will have application insights telemetry that shows there was a user who logged in, and you can also have the user ID, the telemetry user ID, if you're familiar with that. That will be part of the application insights event, so you can see whenever and whoever logged in at any time.
Okay, but you can't see the user himself on Business Central,
So-
a way to see it on Business Central.
But just to add another layer to what Christian said, like if you remember the original picture, right? There's 2 layers of authorization. So the device license is just the first layer. That's what gives them the entitlement to get in. But it's the actual user that ends up as an entry in the users page in Business Central. So then when you look at App Insights and you look at your logs, you will still see the same user telemetry ID in there. So you can always get the mapping.
It can be traced under
Yes.
the telemetry. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Cool.
There was some over here.
Yeah.
So a question about device users. I know in Business Central you need to have, for device users, you need to enter the device in the device users list. And they need to...
Security group, yeah.
No, in Business Central itself, there's a page called device users.
So this is the...
One step further.
Yeah, this is on-prem. So in the
Only
cloud...
on-prem?
Yeah, in the cloud you don't need to do that. It's
Okay.
purely through this license and the security group.
Okay, then the question is gone, yes.
Yeah. But maybe we'll take some notes and maybe improve our documentation or something, because that's good feedback as well. Thank you.
Thank you. When will security groups become available for on-premise environments?
You already have them. You should already be able to use them.
Okay, last information I had that it does not work for on-premise because we cannot connect to Antwerp.
Okay. Drop me a mail. I'll follow that up.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. And the second one, please don't mix GDAP privileged accounts with guest users. If you do that, it breaks the system.
Exactly. But go away from DAP completely. That would be
so
best.
the DAP and the DAP, another problem with the old model is that if you were both a guest user and a delegate admin, we didn't recognize you as a guest user, I think. GDAP doesn't have that problem either.
Yeah, we didn't add it because we thought it might be confusing, but you could technically invite a GDAP user into the environment, assign them a license, and it would all be exactly the same. But thanks for bringing that up. Any more questions? Yeah.
Is it planned to actually allow partners to install custom extensions using service-to-service authorization? Because now it prevents to use the pipelines and the releases effectively and requires user interaction.
I believe you can do it today.
The automation API should...
No, we use DevOps, and on-premise solutions, you just run the script on pull request and it installs the extensions, but in cloud solutions, it's kind of not possible because it requires the user to go in to device login website, put the little code which you get from the Business Central, then you get authorization token, and only then it installs the extension.
Let's also follow up on that offline. To my knowledge, you can actually install extensions via SOS.
So as
By
Christian,
service to service?
Yeah, so as Christian showed the two API access scopes, right? There was the API.Business Central all, and there was also automation.
Yeah.
So both of these actually should allow you to do that, but drop us a mail and let's follow up.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Cool, thank you. Thanks for that question.
Yeah, just touching base on the anonymity of the delegated admins. Is there a way, as a member of the partner org, to figure out like what those users are, what a Entra ID users those map to? Because I mean, a lot of times it's like, oh, this user did X, Y, or Z, and it's like, oh, I'd like to talk to them to find out.
That is
why.
an excellent question. I don't know. I'm sure there's a way.
So the string that we see there, I think, so I look a lot at the access tokens when we build our authorizations stack. So, but send me a mail, because what I want to do is just confirm that this is publicly documented or not before I just share that, hey, I noticed this, but
Yes.
drop me a mail. I'll get back to you. Yeah.
Thanks.
Do you have any more
Up
questions?
there.
Yes.
Just a question: when you've got, when we're using the group for license management, when you have a user on the, let's say, the two groups, is it consuming two licenses?
I don't think so.
No.
But then again, again, this is just my observations. I don't think it's publicly documented, but it also needs to be direct access. So I couldn't get it to work with, nested groups, for example, but there's no clear documentation on this, but maybe it'll come soon. So
Okay.
it should not, but
Okay,
you can always verify, because when you go to the license and you check license users, right, the screenshot that I had shown earlier, it just shows you like one entry for the user. So I don't
So
think
the end result is
yeah.
that the user gets a license.
Yes.
And I don't think a user can have two of the same type of license. And also, just to illustrate how it really works is, so say you have a security group with 100 people in it, and then you you assign 50 licenses to that group. What do you expect to happen? Right? That's a loophole, of course, if it worked like you would think. No, then only 50 of the users will get it. Right? So you will actually be able to see which 50 got it and 50 others won't get it. Right? So at the end of the day, the user gets a license, like any other way you would give it a license. Any last questions? We have one.
Is it possible to use nested groups when working with security groups?
So for environment access, yes. So the one that you would link in the tenant admin center, you can. I believe it should also work for permission sets. The only one that I'm absolutely not sure of is the license assignment. So that one I don't know if nested groups will work or not. So I'll need to clarify. I'll double check that.
I've got one small question regarding security groups and user groups. Currently, we still have customers who have only set up user groups, and for example, they have two companies. And their current pattern often is they assign user group per company. And do I understand it correctly? If they want to transform this to security groups, they would have to create two security groups where they assign the exact same permissions, one for company one, one for company two, to be able to assign the permissions correctly in the future, or?
Yeah,
am I doing something wrong?
if the groups contain different sets of users, you would need to have two security groups in Entra and then set them up per company.
Okay.
Any last questions? If not, then thank you all for coming. Hope you learned something. Have a great conference.
Thank you so much.